Alright, Shirley Osborne is live now. This is day. What did he say? 20 days to go, huh? Right. Okay, we're up. Good morning, good day, good evening, whoever's on. Welcome to day number 25 of my 45 days. 25, that leaves 20 days, just about 3 weeks left. And this one I'm going to tell you has nothing to do with anything we're talking about tonight necessarily, but it happened to me today and it just is too funny not to share. So last week we talked about me and my wild hair, remember? And then I cut off some of my wild hair, so it's not quite as wild because it's not quite as much as it was last week. But I remember yesterday I told you I've been doing a workshop, summer camp with some children. Today we had one little visitor who was 4 years old. And this little girl climbed up on my lap, put her hand in my hair and said to me, "You have my mommy's number?" I said, "Yes." She said, "You know, you could call my mommy. She could do your hair for you." I said, "Oh, you think I need to do my hair?" She said, "Yes." So little miss didn't obviously like my wild hair. Her mommy's a hairdresser, as it turns out. And what struck me was not the usual, children would normally say, "Oh, I don't like your hair." I mean, once I cut my hair, remember I shaved my hair off. And this little friend of mine, a boy, he was probably about 6 or so at the time. He saw me go by. He said, "I don't like your hair." Little 4-year-old didn't do that. She began with, "Do you have my mommy's number?" Now that you have to admit that is, I don't know what to call it, but he's not 4-year-old. He just was really, really so cute. Clearly, little miss has a personality that's going to be leaderly, for want of a better term. It's going to be leaderly. So anyhow, good evening, everybody. We're going to talk tonight about intentional leadership. Last night we talked about soulful leadership. So we talked about self-love, and the night before that we talked about self-leadership, which had a lot to do with self-exploration. And I think I reiterated last night that self-exploration is a constant, and it's not about doubting or questioning yourself, but it's asking yourself questions about how you do things, why you do things, and sort of being aware and being conscious. Because so much of what we do as human beings, and it just is, we just do it. It's rote. It's what is done. Of course, you've all heard the joke. Somebody did something. I think one of them was to do with cooking. Thanksgiving, the mother cooks the turkey this particular way, and is passing it on to her daughter. Her daughter asked her, "Why do you do it this way?" She said, "I don't know. My mom did it that way." Then so the daughter asked the grandmother. Grandmother said, "I don't know. My great grandmother did it that way." And so we do a lot of that. We just do stuff because. That's not intentional. That's just doing it because you're following what's going on. Intentional leadership means you think about what you're doing. You think about why we do things, what difference it's going to make, who it's going to affect, how it's going to affect us, and of course, what comes afterwards, what's supposed to come afterwards. And so, the goal of leadership always, we said last night, let me back a little bit. We said last night that leadership is a relationship. Remember? Leadership is a relationship. It's about the leader and the people who are being led. And we also said that leadership is not necessarily a constant. It doesn't necessarily mean you're out in front, you're always on, the one in the top seat. You're not necessarily the top of the food chain. You could be literally at the bottom of the food chain and display leadership. I'm in the Caribbean. Little things are flying around. I don't know what to tell you. You could be at the bottom of the food chain, and from time to time, when it is necessary, when it shows up, just step into the role and lead what's needed, what needs to be led at the time. That's not intentional either necessarily. It just happens. People do what needs to be done. We've heard stories, think people do really, really brave things and say, well, I didn't think about it, I just did it, because that's who we are. Intentional goes beyond that. There is who we are, and there is how we intentionally express who we are, or how we deliberately, is a word my mother used to use, deliberately use things to achieve specific ends. So we lead not just because we happen to be there, but we lead because we know that our taking this particular action will likely have these knock-on effects. Intentional leadership requires obviously being very aware of what's going on. And so it means being observant. It means paying attention, not just to yourself, obviously, but to all the people around you, to what's going on, to the events, the responses, people's responses to events. Yeah. It requires that you be able to recognize trends, recognize when things are shifting or changing, and specifically create a response as leader that either strengthens what's going on or redirects it. So you take a decision specifically to accomplish something. Yeah. Being intentional also requires being brave. Being brave. Because making decisions sometimes, some decisions are really hard to make. Some decisions, when you think about what the effects are going to be, or when you think what they could be, which usually we anticipate all kinds of things happening, and so very often it doesn't turn that way. You want to do something, you think of all the things that could possibly go wrong. And then you do the thing and find, well, wait a minute, it really was not as hard as we thought. But if you don't have the courage, if you can't build up the courage, dig out the courage to make that step, you're not being intentional. To be brave bravery is something that, again, is not generally expected of women. We're expected to be, what's the word? Soft and retiring, and hide behind the big brave man on the white horse or whatever, metaphorically speaking. Women are expected to depend on, rely on, stay back and let the brave men take over and make the decisions. And of course, there are times when we do that, because we are human beings and relationships require that give and take. But the kind of courage that's required for intentional leadership is, of course, something that women have. I mean, there's no question about it. Women display bravery in all kinds of ways. What they tell me, just making children is a brave decision. Bringing up children, there's nothing more brave than that. Yeah. Women do it all the time, every day. Women make decisions about, for their families, for their communities. Women stand up in ways that don't get much recognition. And women go underneath. Like, think about politics. Think about political activism. Women go into places where men would not, men could not. Men would fear to tread. And they do it because they're brave. Think of men fight wars. They've always fought wars. Men have sent men and boys to war. Think of the kind of courage is required of the women who stay back, to hold things together, to look after everything that needs to be taken care of, while the men are out killing one another. If you think about it, sending people to war it is intentional. People decide to start a war or to engage a war, and put it that way. And when you go out to war, you go out to win the war. You kill or be killed. You intend to do these things. And so often when you talk about intentional leadership, well, on many occasions when I've spoken of intentional leadership, that's what comes back at me. People say things like that. And that is one aspect that women also engage in, because women also fight battles, fight wars, not necessarily the ones on the battlefield that require you point a gun at somebody and shoot. But think of the battles that women fight every day. Think, for example, of women battling for care for their children. Think of women fighting for support for relatives who are suffering from mental health. Think of women whose sons get killed on the streets. Those are battles that require bravery, because those kinds of battles, when you stand up, you get aimed at, but not with a gun. You get shut down you risk getting shut down in all kinds of ways. And it happens to women all the time. Women stand up, suddenly you don't have a job, you don't have, and when I said that, what came to mind was sexual harassment at work. Think of the bravery that's required of women to stand up against and say that my boss is sexually harassing me, or this person down there. And if you look back, think of all the news stories you read and look at what happened to the women. Consider the pushback. One of the things that has always I've always found very troubling is when women get raped, for example, they go to court, and always the courage that is required from a girl or a woman who has been raped to stand up in a court and say, he did this, that, or the other, knowing full well that doing that has her risk being called all kinds of names, has her risk being discarded, in some places has her risk being killed. And yet women do it every day. We stand up and fight these battles. That is taking leadership of your life and also of systems around you, because every time that happens, it affects what's going on. It affects the laws, the policies, the customs, and it erodes it just a little bit. But it requires a kind of bravery that is a depth of bravery that is hard to understand for many people. Intentional leadership requires that depth of bravery. If you think about the suffragettes, it had nothing to do with, it wasn't anything with physical personal harm, except when they chained themselves and got dragged off to court. But they were fighting for women's right to vote. Think of what happened with them. You can look back at pictures and see these women getting dragged by their hair, by their legs. Think just, for example, of what is called the Arab Spring. When I think of that, the image that comes to me is a girl in the blue bra. And I've mentioned that, and I use that as an example in much of the work that I do, because there's this young girl. She's wearing her hijab because it's required. She's on the street. She is part of the movement for freedom, for her right to make her own decisions and lead her life, her right to self-leadership. And she literally was getting stomped on, kicked about by men in boots. She was on the ground. Her hijab was all over the place, and her blue bra was showing, and there were men literally stomping on her with their boots. So every time women stand up, every time women intentionally otherwise, every time women move to make something happen, we get blowback that men don't. It's nothing, because what's added to it is not just the resistance to the change, but the notion that a woman, how dare she? Who does she think she is? Even this little island that I love so much, I remember hearing, I see this happen, and I talk with people, and men say something like about their wife, she can't talk to me. She can't do that to me. She's only a woman. Dismiss her completely. You married her, she has your children, you live with her, she feeds you, she takes care of, and your response is, she can't talk to me like that. She's only a woman. And if that woman were to step up and say, no, I am only a woman, but I am a human being and I have rights, what would happen? Violence is probably what would happen, is what happens in most cases. So women have always to be very careful about, very thoughtful, very pragmatic about the leadership positions that we take. Very, very, very often. And so intentional leadership can be kind of difficult for women. Because if you think about it, you start to think of all the things that could happen, all the bad things, the painful things, you might choose not to take the leadership position. I want to suggest, I put leadership, intentional leadership in this program precisely because of all these things that I've thought about and all the challenges to women in leadership. And because I want women to think through carefully, not just the easy leadership opportunities, but the really, really serious ones. Because I believe fundamentally that all of us, each of us, is here to accomplish something. And remember, I said it before, it might not be some big thing that involves millions of people. It might be just something within our family. It might be just that we are there to make this spark in this one person who is going to change the world. It might be us, we light the spark. So I want women to think carefully about engaging in intentional leadership. I want women to think, yes, I am a leader. Yes, I'm brave. Yes, I'm here to do something big and important. I'm here to do something, and I'm going to do that one. I'll find the courage. I'll pull up the courage. I'll stand up, be counted, be heard to make the difference. Because I know that if I do this, that, and the other, I might get this. I probably will get this pushback. But if I do stand up, what will likely happen is all of these things. And so I choose to be a leader because I know that my being a leader can have all of these positive effects running right through time. So intentional leadership is not something you hear people talk about a lot, except, you walk into an office and tell people what to do because you know your job for the day. The deep intentional leadership I'm talking about is where you take responsibility for the effect you have on the world. That's what all this boils down to. You take responsibility clearly for the effect you will have on the world, for the things that you will do in the world. That's it. Intentional leadership is that. It requires courage. It requires self-awareness, awareness of your surroundings. It requires engagement. And it requires taking responsibility, accepting the responsibility for the effect you will have in the world. You accept the responsibility, you do the work. If you accept the responsibility, the courage just shows up. If you say, I'm responsible for this, I see this, I see that this is what I'm to do, the courage will show up. That's it. That is intentional leadership. So I want to ask you all to accept responsibility for the effect you are meant to have on the world. Go explore deep into the core of you and find out what that is. It is there, something. It might not be, like I said, it might not be that you get to change lives for millions of people. It might just be that you have such impact on one person And that one person is the one that changes the world. But you're intentional about the things that you do because you accept that responsibility and you find the courage and the gall and the gumption and everything you need to have this happen, to make this happen. Intentional leadership makes things happen. So, tomorrow we're going to talk about seated leadership, which is the easy one, I think. Seated leadership is when you've risen and you're sitting in the chair. You are the president, the CEO, you have the corner office, you are the big cheese. How do you behave? How do you manage that? How do you handle that? We'll talk about that tomorrow. In the meantime, please have yourself a lovely day, lovely afternoon, pleasant evening. If you're going to bed, have a good night. And when you get a chance, have a look at www.shirleyosborne.com. That's where the Women's Leadership Circle lives. Check it out, see our program, see what we do, and plan on joining us on the circle later this month. The circle is the last Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of the month, different time zones. Plan on joining us and come hang out, have a good time. Plan on becoming a member of the circle so that you can participate in all those cool things. All right. And actually, while we're at it, I asked last night, what am I going to do after these 45 days? And somebody said, my cousin actually, so she might be not exactly impartial. She said, keep it going. I'm quite enjoying this. I am enjoying is probably not the right word. I'm seeing some value in this. I am learning so much from doing this. I'm clarifying so much in my brain as I speak with you, as I prepare these things for you. And even though some of them relate to the programs, this week we're doing Lead from Inside. And I thought I had it all clear. I thought I had everything written down because I took the time to prepare that program, and talking to you about it is bringing up different things or different ways of saying things. And because you said them in a different way, it sparked something different. So I want to thank you for your engagement. All of you who are listening, who will listen to this, thank you so much. Lots and lots of people log on and listen to these afterwards because, like I said, we're doing it in different time zones so that people can be live sometimes and other people get a chance to just listen afterwards. But I want to thank you for being present so that I feel inspired and motivated to keep this going. And I continue to learn so that when I'm engaging with other people, I have even more to contribute to them. That is my intentional leadership. Looking at the effect I will have on the world is looking at the effect of what I teach, what I share, what I bring to you and to the women in the Women's Leadership Circle. So have yourselves a pleasant evening. Check out the website. Sleep well. And I will see you tomorrow. Take good care.